the service area. And that includes, of course, commercial, residential, non-residential properties. Through the treatment plants we own and operate, about 90 billion gallons of wastewater is treated each year. And through our regional stormwater management program, we have nearly 500 linear miles of what we deem regional streams that we have some degree of oversight and involvement with in some degree or another. So 3 treatment plants, easterly, westerly, and southerly. They are, again, 90 billion gallons a year is what they treat of wastewater. Perhaps you've heard of Project Clean Lake as well. This is a 25-year project where about $3 billion is being invested in storage tunnels to address combined sewer overflows. And the rates for wastewater that are paid by our customers are what is funding that. The Regional Stormwater Management Program generates a little over $40 million a year annually, and those dollars are used to support and solve flooding and erosion problems throughout the stormwater service area. That program is funded through our stormwater fee, which is based on impervious area on any given property. So we want to make sure that you understand exactly what the combined sewer collection system is, because this is what really drives the green infrastructure grant itself. So back in the day, when the city of Cleveland and many other cities throughout the United States were first being founded and developed, there weren't treatment plants really. Sewers were a new thing as well. The sewers were built to manage all runoff, mainly stormwater runoff, sanitary waste. But those pipes basically carried all that. I like to refer to it as the stew, the mixture of the wastewater and rainwater. So you'll hear me use that term a lot today. But that it was all carried to the environment without any treatment prior to wastewater treatment plants being a thing. So those sewer lines obviously connect to homes and businesses throughout the drainage areas, and that resulted in numerous water quality problems, of course, by discharging untreated sewage into our waterways and our lakes. So that continued to be a problem for a while, and the problem is it's referred to as a combined sewer system. So let's kind of take a look at what that entails. The combined sewer system essentially is made up of different landscapes. Okay, so we obviously have a lot of suburban area in our service area, a lot of homes, apartment dwellings, things like that. And we also obviously have a lot of industry in the area. So there's also some open space and parks and whatnot. But the entire landscape contributes to the combined sewer system where it exists. So more specifically, though, the homes and apartments, and obviously even businesses, create a lot of domestic wastewater, through flushing of toilets, through washing of clothes, dishwashers, all that good stuff. That all gets discharged from your home or apartment building and is one source of the flow that gets contributed to the combined sewer system. Rainwater obviously is another big source of water that is contributed to the combined sewer system. And that obviously is, for the most part, every square inch of our service area. And then, of course, industrial wastes are created by the industrial facilities, and that is also often discharged into the combined sewer. So these are the 3 main sources of the flow that is in the combined sewer service area. And that is what mixes when it rains. And that's what I like to refer to as that stew that's in the pipes. So we like to think about the network of pipes, the infrastructure that makes it up, similar to a tree. So those smaller pipes that discharge waste from individual homes and individual businesses and at the street level. Those are the branches of the tree, if you will, the smaller diameter pipes. And those all convey the flow to larger, what we've referred to as interceptor pipes or interceptors. And those would be the trunks of the tree. Those are the large diameter pipes that eventually take as much flow as possible to the wastewater treatment plants. And those pipes, they range anywhere from a couple feet in diameter up to 10 to 12 feet in diameter at times. So they can be quite large, obviously all underground, so you don't really see them. Another main component of the combined sewer system are what we call regulators that are inside the interceptor pipes. These regulators determine where water goes, and I'm going to have a graphic later that better explains that. So keep that image in mind, but that's just a piece of the puzzle here with combined sewer systems. And then we have overflow pipes. So during rainstorms, the stew often gets past the regulators as designed and discharges to the environment. And that's what creates a lot of the issues that we are all familiar with. And of course, we have the wastewater treatment plants. And as I mentioned, we have 3 major plants in our service area. So that's the infrastructure that makes up the system. And here's how the system works. So during a dry day, a nice sunny day, you have wastewater coming from your homes, you have wastewater coming from your businesses, and that all, the graphic's a little bit off, but the point of this is that show that regulator forces all that water down the pipe to the wastewater treatment plant, and the only discharge is at the wastewater treatment plants on nice dry days, okay? Everything's treated, everybody's happy. We get a little bit of rain, some light rain showers. Again, not too big of a deal. The pipes have some extra capacity in them where they can handle light rain volumes in addition to the wastewater from your homes and your businesses. And again, that can all eventually be treated at the wastewater treatment plant, and still everybody is happy. Problem comes when you get some heavy rain events, some storms that contribute to the system. And you can see the graphic is supposed to show you that there's a lot more rainwater, the blue squares, that are being conveyed to the system. Some of it goes to the wastewater treatment plant, but that pipe that feeds the wastewater treatment plant has limited capacity, so it can't all go there. So some of it goes over top the regulator and eventually to either the Cuyahoga River or Lake Erie. You may be familiar with the bacteria warnings that sometimes happen, for example, at Edgewater Park. When you hear those, it's generally right after a heavy rain event. That's because a combined sewer overflow event occurred relatively recently, and it takes a day, 2 days, maybe 3 days to clear up before it's safe to go in the water again. So here's a picture of that regulator, a little more detail. And so there's 2 pipes. You can see an upper pipe on the left side and a lower pipe on the right side. During dry weather, again, a nice sunny day, really all you're seeing is the wastewater from your homes and businesses. And that pipe goes to the wastewater treatment plant. Again, everything's treated, everybody's happy. You can get a little bit of water, a light rain event. And again, as I mentioned before, there's extra capacity in those pipes to, for the most part, handle light rain events. And so that mixture or that stew of rainwater and wastewater still can get to the treatment plant. And again, everybody's happy. The problem occurs when you get those heavy rain events and that weir, that concrete weir in the middle of the picture there activates, is what we say. So the pipe on the upper part of the picture, again, has limited capacity, limited volume. And if there's enough rainwater, there's too much volume, and so it spills over that regulator, and that lower pipe is what takes the runoff directly to a river, a stream, or Lake Erie. And so that's why we have the events that we do for combined sewer overflows after a heavy rain event. The result of that is discharges that are evident at the combined sewer overflow locations. There's a picture of one occurring there. I don't know the date of it, but that's the stew. It doesn't look like much more than rainwater, but there's a considerable amount of wastewater mixed in with that as well. It's predominantly rainwater, but a lot of bacteria. And then, you'll see the debris, the floatables and whatnot accumulate within the next several days after a rain event like that and an overflow event. Because those things, again, are typically conveyed to the treatment plant and removed from the system. But if they get to the overflow pipes, you're going to see that evidence in the waterways. So this is the map of our service area. So the gray area is our sewer, our wastewater service area. The green area that's inlaid within it is the combined sewer area. So maybe about a third to a fourth of our total service area is under the combined sewer system. But the grant, the Green Infrastructure Grant Program, is limited to be used in the combined sewer area because we're trying to use that grant to remove stormwater from the combined sewer system. And a little more detail, a little closer up. But if we take a real close look at the combined sewer service area, there are, if you remember that pipe that was discharging all that water and all that debris, there are 118 of those throughout our service area, scattered along. Obviously, they discharge into the rivers or directly into Lake Erie. But there's a considerable amount, and every time we get a heavy rain, a good majority of those will activate and discharge untreated stew to the environment. So I'm going to hand it over to Jessica to talk now, and she's going to give you a little more detail about the actual Green Infrastructure Grant Program itself.
Thanks, Chris. You can go to the next slide. So one of the things, like Chris mentioned, our goal is basically to keeping the stormwater from overwhelming the combined sewer system. This happens by reducing the volume of stormwater in the system. Another goal is also to reduce the stress on the wet weather drainage and collection system, which then will increase the cold benefits and then have a healthy environment. Next slide. So one of the things with the green infrastructure is we started off way long ago with a natural process intact. Forest, a lot of forest and a lot of green, a lot of streams and all that. You can click, Chris. And then eventually those areas have been developed by us. So it removed all those natural processes, creating parking lots and homes and buildings. So then what we want to do is go back and restore those natural processes by using bioretentions and permeable pavers, stormwater control measures to get back to that natural process state. Next slide. So one of the things is our Green Infrastructure Grant Program focus is funding GI implementation and long-term maintenance projects and to remove and reduce stormwater runoff from the combined sewer collection system that protects, preserve, enhance, and restores the natural hydraulic functions. So this picture here, basically, you see the problem of the runoff from asphalt pavement area, and it's just running off all kinds of dirt and stuff. With the GI, I'm sorry, soil, Chris. With the GI, we're trying to eliminate or reduce that pollutant runoff and the trash, the runoff that goes into our system. Go ahead, Chris. So with the grant, again, this is just part one, and I'm just going to give an overview. Our next part 2 and part 3 will have a deeper dive into the application and what is a strong project. So right now, there are 2 options. Some people might say 3, but 2 options. One is the design only This is where you submit your conceptual drawings and stuff saying, hey, I know I want to do something, but not sure, but here is what we were planning to do. We fund this at $25,000, so you get an entire year to complete it. And then we ask you to come back and submit an application for the construction part of that, which is an additional $250,000 max. Our second option is coming in as an applicant as a design and or construction project, which means you're ready to construct your project and complete it within a year. That is also a max of $250,000. Next slide. One of the terms on funding is this is a reimbursement grant, which means everything is reimbursement that pertains to the green infrastructure component of your project. The reimbursement will be made on the project specific invoices as related to the awarded project. So we reimburse what is just the GI component. Some people have match funding for it and stuff like that, but we'll get into that the part 2. Go ahead, Chris. Here is an overview of our project, our program so far from 2014 to our recently recommended projects for the 2023. Right now, we have a grand total of 12 million plus that we awarded, and then the runoff reduction gallon is a total of 32 million plus. Go ahead, Chris. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the timeline of our grant. Again, this is an annual grant program. So the timeline is consistent and it stays the same fairly well. So one of the first steps and an important step is the determination of your eligibility. One of the things is you must, like Chris said, be in the combined sewer area. He mentioned it was the green area. If you see the map on the right below, it's that yellow area, same area he was talking about earlier. So that needs to be verified. We have tools and a Esri map that people can use to verify if they are within the combined area. And another thing, the applicant must be represented by either a member community, government entity, a nonprofit 501c3, or a business that is working or in partnership with their CDC. This is why we are having this right now. So go ahead, Chris. Okay, so this is another map that shows our combined area in purple. And then you can see that the yellow dots are our current GI projects that were implemented or being implemented as we speak. Also, this map gives us some information about the gapped areas that potentially might warrant a project. As you can see, the south portion of our combined area, there could be potential projects in those areas. So think about that for the future too as well. Go ahead, Chris. Okay, so starting in May, end of May, early June, the request for proposals, the RFPs, they are presented to the board for approval. And then once our board of trustees approve the RFP, it is pushed out to the public. And then after that, what we do is at mid-June or at the end of June, we have a huge pre-proposal workshop. This workshop is a good 2.5, 3-hour workshop to get in the nitty-gritty of preparing people for submitting an application. In July and August, we encourage everyone who is thinking about submitting an application for funding to contact us for an individual pre-proposal workshop. We can meet in person, virtually, we can do site visits, we answer questions and we review documentation. This is the time where if you want a strong application to use the sewer district, particularly Chris and myself as resources before you submit your application. Go ahead, Chris. So September is our application deadline. Usually this is the first or second week of September. On your left, you'll see the application scoring rubric criteria and the list of points per the criteria. So the expected benefits of the project is basically the stormwater calculations, which our team will verify those numbers and those calculations for you. The project feasibility, that's basically the entire project from permits and understanding your project schedule and the budgets and all that. And then the problematic capacity, which is basically the long-term maintenance of the project. Do you understand the budget for the long-term maintenance of the project? And do you understand what goes along with that maintenance for the capacity, for the whole life capacity of the project? So the project, some of the projects are 25 to 30 years. So we want to make sure that you know how to maintain it. One of the things that we do offer is the first year maintenance. Typically that's in like a $5,000 range, depending on your project, but we do offer the funding for the first year maintenance. And then additionally, the visibility and additional community benefits. That's basically where is your project located. There's an educational component to it as well, which includes the signage. So is it accessible to the public too as well? So these are what we score the applications on. Go ahead, next slide. After the application deadline, our internal application review team starts reviewing each and every application that comes through. We will reach out to applicants to clarify anything that needs to be clear, needs to have some more clarity in the application. So for example, maybe someone missed getting the letter of support, we couldn't find it, so we'll reach out to them and ask if they can get that to us as soon as possible. And then we score the application based off the rubric you saw in the previous slide. Go ahead, Chris. Once we complete the review, we then select the final recommended projects for the next funding round. And this goes to our Board of Trustees to present the projects and for them to approve to move forward. Once that is completed, the applicants, matter of fact, the applicants that day will get notified if they were funded or if they were not funded. And then our legal department starts drafting agreements to be signed. Go ahead, Chris. I almost went ahead of myself. And then in January, once those agreements are signed, you can start submitting for a reimbursement. So that is critical to the agreement signed might take a little bit longer, but the quicker those agreements are signed, the quicker you can start your reimbursement starting in January. Go ahead, Chris. Okay, so then in February for the funded projects, there is a mandatory kickoff meeting. This meeting lasts less than 30 minutes. We just wanted to go over our schedule, what is expected from the applicant, and so forth. Go ahead, Chris. And then in April, the funded projects, there is a mandatory operation and maintenance workshop. And then the first quarterly report is due as well. This mandatory operation and maintenance workshop, again, we go into extreme detail of what is expected of the project, the timeline, what do you call it? The milestones that we need to be on site to look at and stuff like that. Go ahead, Chris. And then again, for the funded projects in December, projects are completed and all reimbursements are final. So you got a whole entire year to complete the projects and to submit all your reimbursements. Now, some people submit their reimbursements 4 times a year, aligning with the progress report. Some submit it twice and some submit it all at once at the end. Go ahead, Chris. Okay, so the GI grant, important dates to remember, and everyone will be on the mailing list for these. So RFP is in June, most likely that first week of June, and then the pre-application meetings, which we call the pre-proposal meetings, happen July and August. Again, this is an opportunity, and this is key, that you utilize us for resources for a great and strong application. The application submission deadline is always in September. And then that's through the application portal. Right now, Chris and I are looking at the application to make sure that it's more user-friendly. So you might see some differences from last year's applications to this year. And then October and November, the project reviewing period and the notification for applicants that have been funded or not funded. Go ahead, Chris. Here right now are some of the success stories. This is Family Ministry. We call this project the treatment train because they have several practices on their site, from bioretentions to permeable pavers. This entire parking lot is permeable pavers. You see the cisterns in the background, but that wasn't part of the green infrastructure grant. One of the things why I like showing this, because they have multiple practices, but there was some lesson learned of the pavers, not putting them directly in front of the big trash can because of the trucks keep coming in, and now we're seeing dents. The practice is still functioning, but it's something that we need to look at every year. Go ahead, Chris. And this one is a unique project. This is in Ohio City. This is what we call the living wall. Instead of a green roof, they made a living wall. They maintained this consistently since 2014. It looks great every year. Not only do they have the living wall, but they do have a underground cistern that's on the side of the building, where the mill truck is right there. So there's 2 systems here. This is great because it's unique and it's visible to the public. Go ahead, Chris. And then I like to feature our upcoming story, which is Menlo Park Academy. This is a school. They actually came in 2022 as a design only. They worked with us and used us as a resource throughout the year. And then they got funded for the 2023 construction round. On the left is what it's looking like now. And then on the right is what students are getting involved of what they want the project to look like, and learning about the stormwater and green infrastructure. Go ahead, Chris. So I'm going to pass it to Chris. He's going to talk about the overcoming barriers, and this is through the Green Infrastructure Leadership Exchange.
All right, thank you, Jessica. So yeah, what I want to kind of review with everybody now is an effort that we undertook this past year to address some of the barriers that have been identified of our Green Infrastructure Grant. Barriers to folks that are interested in the grant, but because they don't have the money for reimbursement, for the reimbursement process that the grant entails, were kind of left out or unable to be part of the grant opportunity. So this was a project that was had many partners to it. Of course, us, Village Capital Corporation, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and the City of Cleveland's Office of Sustainability. We got together late 2021 and found out about a grant that was offered through a group known as the Green Infrastructure Leadership Exchange. I'll refer to them as the Exchange from here on out. Let me explain a little bit about what that group is and what their grant entails. So the Exchange and their collaborative grant program. The Exchange itself is a group made up of members of different peers that work with green infrastructure on a regular basis. Most of the members are, which are about 60 in number right now, are members or work for utilities, they work for municipalities, cities, counties. But the one common thing that all the members of this group have is that somehow, some way, they work to implement green infrastructure in their communities. So the Leadership Exchange their purpose is to really help those communities implement green infrastructure programs. We meet on a regular basis, different topics related to financing green infrastructure, how to maintain green infrastructure, how to build it in the first place, how to manage assets, all that good stuff. But different groups meet on a regular basis to talk about common issues that they deal with related to those topics and try to work together to solve those problems and learn from each other on how different communities have worked around some of the problems that they've discovered. But the Leadership Exchange is who makes this happen, basically. And all those member communities or those members organizations pay an annual fee to be part of this. So the collaborative grant program that the Exchange offers is offered annually. We received a small grant back in 2021 to help cover the costs of our time and resources to address issues that we're focused on, specifically related to our own GI grant program. But the grant program they offer is really there to help solve problems. If you have an identified problem with implementing green infrastructure, their grant is to help you resolve that. And the idea is that whatever resolution comes out of the effort to resolve it is information that can be shared with all the other members of the Exchange. So the Exchange is working to create what they call a playbook of green infrastructure. And so they've had this program in place since, I think, 2016, if I recall correctly. But there are several chapters, if you will, of this playbook that have been generated by past funded collaborative grant efforts of other members of the group. So specifically how we used that collaborative grant, we have known for a good number of years that the reimbursement nature of our grant is a barrier. To be blunt, those who don't have deep pockets and can't afford to pay their design engineers and their contractors up front and then wait for our reimbursement have a disadvantage of getting our grant. So that's an equity issue that we identified, and we've been trying to find a good solution to that, and we think we have. But that is what Kwame is going to be talking about when I'm done here. But that's why we pursued this grant. We also wanted to put a larger focus on identifying what co-benefits of green infrastructure are most important to our area and who funds those co-benefits, so that we can try to align our grant funding with other potential grant funding that's out there on a local basis. And then lastly, the other goal of our project was to better prioritize where our grant dollars are spent in our combined sewer area. to make sure that they have the best or greatest impact on resolving issues related to localized flooding, basement backups, that type of thing. These are small scale projects for the most part, so they're best used to address some of the smaller issues. I guess maybe not small is the right word, but some of the issues that a larger project would entail. So the desired results of our effort, certainly we hope that we will be able to have a larger pool of applicants for our grant program. We also hope and plan that eventually the green infrastructure projects will be distributed more equitably throughout our service area. Through the identification of co-benefits and co-benefit funding sources, we anticipate there being additional dollars available to perhaps create bigger projects. Maybe there's, although we don't require any match for our grant, maybe that you offer some kind of match, which we always encourage, not required but encouraged. But if you can find additional funding sources on a local basis that complement our grant, fantastic. Vice versa, if there's a larger project anybody has in mind where our grant can serve as the match requirement for that, that certainly can be done as well. But ultimately, we want to make sure that we have projects that are more targeted and go towards the places that will most benefit from it as far as flooding, basement backup, and resiliency of the combined system is impacted. So the expectations we have of the 4 partners in the grant is to get green infrastructure in what has traditionally been the financially disinvested areas, and overcoming that reimbursement barrier. We also hope to get more projects in our own priority areas where they would best benefit the combined sewer system. We want to, as I mentioned earlier, find a way to better align different funding sources that complement each other through the multiple co-benefits that green infrastructure allows for. We are currently going through a process of taking a closer look at how we score grant applications internally and improving that system as well to make it more meaningful. And certainly we want to increase the partnerships that are afforded by doing green infrastructure smarter and better ways. And that's certainly the focus of today's workshop. We want to build the capacity of folks that are interested in our grant, and CDCs are the #1 on our list, if you will, to get you folks familiar with our grant so that you can be part of successful projects in the future. But last but not least, the big thing is the effort where we've undertaken to overcome that barrier of the reimbursement. So the main effort of this grant is to work with Village Capital Corporation to develop a new loan product through them that is specific to the Green Infrastructure Grant Program itself. And I am going to turn it over to Kwame to discuss that. He is the gentleman that has been working on that full-heartedly over the last several months. And I will stop sharing my screen, but I will ask Divya, do we have any questions in the chat that we need to respond to at this point?
Chris, there are a couple questions. One of them actually goes do we want to do the questions now, or should we wait to capture the questions a little bit later? How would you?
Why don't we, if they're specific to what we just talked about, we could take a couple now, and if there's many, we can wait to take some later as well.
Okay. I think one of the questions early on was, how often does the CSO flood?
Okay. Depends. Of course, that's the answer. So there was 116 different CSO outfalls. Okay. Each one is unique. Some have more capacity than others. But they don't all flood at the same time. They don't all flood during the same rain event. It's very specific to the drainage area feeding each of those combined sewer overflow outfalls. One thing I did here, now I mentioned the tunnel system, a project Clean Lake is basically helping to solve this problem. I believe, if I'm correct, Edgewater Park used to overflow on a frequent basis. We had, if I remember the story correctly, we had a recent overflow, but it was the first one in over a year that occurred because one of the tunnel systems is working in that area at this time. So the system is working. If you need specifics on that, we have other folks that we could get that information to you.
I'm just going to share. One of them asked if the GI project map is available in the GIS format. I think the response is that this is available. They'll be updating the story map on the sewer district website, and everybody can take a look at some of the projects that have been done. The last question that I have here before we can have Kwame answer some of present his next part is, when do massive new tunnels open up, like on the Scranton Peninsula and University Circle?
Okay, I don't know if any of my other sewer district cohorts can respond to that. I'm not the tunnel guy, unfortunately. So I don't have a schedule of when that's going to take place, but I believe the tunnel system that's part of right adjacent to Westerly, is the pump station is under construction right now that will bring that stored stew up to the treatment plant, and I believe it will be activated very soon, within the next month or two.
That's all the questions that we have for right now. I think, again, thank you very much, Chris and Jessica. This, again, just to clarify, someone asked in the chat, this project is supported by Guile, the exchange. So we're here today to share, what we've learned talking to CDCs, and the goal of this is to, overcome one massive barrier, which is the financial barrier to accessing these grants, because they're reimbursable, especially for some CDCs that have been smaller. I think there is. Well, Phil, do you want to ask your question about project eligibility right now, and then we'll send it to Kwame?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. Chris, I think I talked to you briefly about this at the APA Planning Zoning Conference, but I feel like this is probably the right forum to bring this back up because all the CDCs may be interested in a similar project. There were two road rehabilitation projects in our service area within the last year or so. And so one of the opportunities that we learned from this was that there was a situation in where the contractor and the city decided to remove some excessive hardscapes, some double sidewalk in an area. And that allowed us to kind of have a conversation with MoCop about where this else might be possible within these road rehabilitation projects. I was kind of surprised to hear from them that they were open to examining virtually any location to do this. I thought for sure that that was maybe like a special situation, that they were just going to restore the existing conditions of whatever it was. But they allowed us to do basically a survey of the entire area and then make a request to have those hardscapes removed if the property owners consented to it. And so we did that. And I also then simultaneously applied for a county healthy urban tree canopy grant to plant trees in those restored tree lawns. This resulted in about 9,500 square feet of planting 32 trees. So it was significant. And so what I learned from this is that the city is willing to do this on these projects, but beyond that, they're also willing for us to examine beyond road rehabilitation projects for them if council people, for example, are willing to use discretionary funds to remove this. So the point being is that what I'm trying to achieve in 2023 in our service area is I want to be able to survey every single existing section of roadway and right of way in Ward 15 to develop a map of sorts that would be able to hopefully be used for a grant application to the sewer district, green infrastructure grant, to be able to remove these sections and then overlay that with existing tree canopy grant program things. But I guess my question is this something that would be eligible for the planning grant in particular? Because it takes a lot of our time. You know, it's going to take me I don't even know, months of time to dedicate to doing this, to actually map this out. But once we get this in a regrid software system like what Western Reserve is using, this is all something that can be shared, the methodology, all of that with all the CDCs in Cleveland. It achieves two goals. It's going to capture stormwater, and it's also going to help us with creating space for expanding our tree canopy goals. So I just wanted to kind of ask this open question about, do you think that's generally something that would be eligible either for planning and or implementation with the GIG?
Yeah, so thanks, Phil. I do remember our conversation we had, of course. So again, I'm going to say it depends. Unfortunately, I can't say yes or no at this point. And what I will offer is that the design only grant, the intent of it was to have a specific project and to do an engineering design of green infrastructure on that particular parcel. Okay, and that's how it's been used to date so far in the 2 years. Well, it's been in place for 1 year. We just awarded grants for next year's round of design only projects. You're talking more of a planning effort to identify where this could be done. I'm not going to say no, we wouldn't fund that, because obviously there's a benefit to our combined sewer system to do exactly what you're talking about, and love the idea that you're already thinking about partnering it with another co-benefit funding source is exactly what we want through the county tree funding. Trees in themselves provide a stormwater benefit. But trees planted within a green infrastructure practice, like a tree box, for example, if you're familiar, would be something we'd be more interested in, I think, because that has a greater benefit to the combined system itself as far as conveying runoff to it, absorbing it, and the trees utilizing that runoff as well. Maybe even we can get some infiltration below the system as well. But that, just at the top of my head, that's what comes to mind. I think what we would need to do, we should probably sit down with you more specifically and bring a few other folks from our office into that discussion to see what the possibilities are, though. So, but I love the idea. How it fits with our grant in terms of design only and construction is the only where there's a little gray area that we need to kind of work out. So, all right.
Thank you. I see no more questions. So at this point, I'm going to pass it on to Kwame to talk about the next part of this.
Thank you, Divya. Yes. Hi, good morning. Lots of familiar faces on this call, so I'm excited. If you have permission to share screen, right? Can everyone see my screen, the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so my name is Kwame Bachwe. I'm with Village Capital Corporation as the Director of Community Impact and Innovation. And so we have been working with the sewer district, as Chris and Divya have expressed over the last several months, trying to figure out ways that we can address some of the gaps and challenges that we see with the administration of this particular program that is. I know a lot of you are familiar with CNP, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and Village Capital, but for those who are not familiar, Village Capital Corporation, we are a CDFI, that is a community development financial institution, and we are a wholly owned subsidiary of CNP, and we have been doing real estate lending for the last 30 years, also in this market, but in recent times, we've been innovating and thinking through other programs and products that we can make available to our partner CDCs that we work with. And matter of fact, we went through strategic planning this year, and one of the main pillars in our new strategic plan is access to capital And so part of the thinking is how do we make more capital and more access for particularly the CDC ecosystem to the different work. So when the opportunity came to be a third partner to the Siwa district in figuring out how can we make it easier for CDC specifically, but also other neighborhood-based nonprofit organizations to access the green infrastructure grant, we seized the opportunity to do some thinking and do some design. And I've had conversation with some of you on this call, and we've also talked with some previous grantees and came up with a gap finance product for this. So the thinking, and again, as Chris related earlier on, part of the gap or part of the challenge with the program, the GIG program as they have it now, is that we just do not have enough CDCs or nonprofits or other neighborhood-based organizations applying for the grants, because the reimbursement structure of the grant program currently is that you do the project, you put it on your balance sheet, and then you come back and ask for reimbursement. And we know that a lot of CDCs have really tight operating funds. So it's always difficult for them to be able to put those expenses and feel, as you alluded to, even for the design stage of the project as well. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy and resources that could go into that. And you're expected to carry some of that and then ask for reimbursement after the fact. So what we have designed is a gap financing product. And for those who are not familiar, the way grant finance programs work is that you get either a line of credit with a financial institution, or the amount of money that you need to fund a particular project in expectation that you'd be receiving some inflow of cash later on to be able to offset that money that you are lending. So that is a similar product that we have developed at VCC for this particular program to plug in that gap. And so what we've done is, again, from the conversations that we've had and with this going work that we have been doing with the Siwa district and coming up with this product, and also just before I even go on, this is just an overview, like a high level overview of what we have been thinking. And so there would be subsequent session that will be dedicated to doing a deep dive on what this product is going to be, what the eligibility criteria is, how it's going to be structured, how you can access these funds, and how it's going to be administered. So again, this is just high level, but I'm happy to answer questions at the end. Okay, I already explained why we are doing this, because we would want to see more of you CDCs not to worry about how am I going to fund a GIG project, even if I'm awarded a grant. How am I going to fund it and wait for reimbursement? We want to eliminate those worries from you. So we are making this available to encourage more CDCs to be able to apply for these grants. That is one. And two is that, again, as I mentioned, we know that this puts a lot of pressure on your operating budget and funds that you have. So to ease that pressure, this would provide you a line of credit. So you'd be able to access funds to be able to carry on the project, so you can have the leeway that you need to wait for the Siwa district to make reimbursements to you. And then the third part is also that, just given the data that we've seen, we know that a lot of the GIG projects that have been deployed in the city are not always in the places that they are probably needed the most, even though it's a whole system and it contributes to the bigger picture of reducing that overflow. We also know that we don't see enough of these GIG programs in some of the historically disinvested geographies. So we also think that it's an environmental justice thing to make sure that we are creating access and making sure that more organizations, or we have more projects within some of these areas. Okay, so the loan product itself, as I said, it would be a line of credit that if you qualify, you would get access to from VCC. The line of credit, the amount would be equivalent, either equivalent to the full amount that the Siwa district gives you as a grant for your construction project, or would structure it in such a way that it could be a percentage of it, knowing that there'll be reimbursements along the line. So you are able to pay those monies back to VCC as you get your reimbursements from the Siwa district. So it will be a 1-year term line of credit that will be extended to the CDC or other nonprofit grantees of the program. And we also know that there are, churches or religious organizations that may be within your geography that may be interested in applying for the GIG grant as well. What we would like to see is that because VCC could not lend directly to a church, if a church, for instance, decides to partner with a CDC to work on a GIG program, would be able to extend a line of credit to the CDC, and the CDC can act almost like a fiscal agent to the church or the other entity that is working within that particular geography. As I said, even though we are making this a one-year term, we understand that for a typical GIG project would take a whole year of construction to be able to get it done. But in cases where that timeline is longer than the one-year term that we will be structuring these loans for, we are willing and amenable to modifying the terms and making sure that we have enough time for you to be able to finish the projects that you are working on. And so the idea here is that there's some flexibility that we are going to build into the way this loan product is administered to make it easy for you to be able to, not worry about what the challenges or difficulties are going to be and focus more on the project that you want to do and applying for the grants and be able to, producing strong applications to the program. The loan that will be given will be guaranteed again by the awarded grant. So the idea is that, and we've been having these conversations with the sewer district, knowing that you have received the grants, we know the amount of the grant, and we know that there are guarantees in there and safeguards in there for you to complete the projects that you are working on. And so the idea is that we structure this in such a way that when you are doing the project, whether it's quarterly reimbursements that you're asking for or monthly reimbursements, you are getting money along the way to be able to carry the project and keep it going until you are getting those reimbursements back, and then you can pay VCC back the monies that we will be loaning to you. We've given critical thoughts to what the fees are going to be, and we've done a lot of thinking whether or not we should put that interest on this line of credit, or if we should figure out a way to have it grant funded so we can cover our own internal costs of operation and administration. It's still a conversation that is ongoing, but by the time we are actually putting this product out there, I think that would be settled. But even if there's going to be a fixed percentage, I can assure you that it's going to be a very small percentage that you should not have to stress about or worry about. But ideally, we would want to have some additional grants to be able to fund and cover VCC operations, so you would not have to worry about paying interest or any fees on the money that we are lending to you. So the whole idea is to make it as easy as possible and make it as cost effective as possible for you to be able to pursue some of these projects. As far as eligibility is concerned, for this first rollout of the loan product, we want to make it a pilot to really test it out and see what the gaps would be so we can fix it in subsequent years. And so for this first iteration, it's going to be just CDCs and other nonprofits that are working within the neighborhoods. That is one. The second, eligibility obviously is that you must have received an award from the sewer district to be able to qualify for this loan product. And the third one is that, just as all underwriting goes, we would expect that you have your up-to-date financials, you have your up-to-date organizational documents, you have up-to-date taxes to enable us to be able to do the underwriting for the loan that we would be given. For the process itself of doing this, once the sewer district announces who the awardees are for the next round, CDCs or other nonprofits that are interested in taking advantage of this program would have you apply to VCC for the line of credit, and then we'll go through the whole underwriting with you. And once you have it, and you have your budget and you have your project schedule and all of those out, then we can look at how we are going to finance the project on the ongoing basis and what agreements we can come to as far as requesting reimbursements from the sewer districts are concerned. And so the underwriting would have all of those details in terms of how many days do you need to be sending monies to VCC after you receive your reimbursement from the sewer district. And so that's going to be part of the process. I think part of the detail is also that we give you the advance, you do the project, or you start the project. When you are coming back for your second draw to support, to be sure that monies that are being lended to you for this project are actually being used for what they are meant for. So we can build in some accountability into that and securing not just the loan that we are giving to you, but the quality of work that you are delivering for the sewer district, and making sure that those inspections and due diligence is done all along the way. And so this is largely what we've come up with. And again, as I said, this is just a high level to let you know the thinking that we've been doing over the last couple of months. But in the next session, which is going to be dedicated to going, doing a deeper dive on this, we'll be able to give you a lot more information and be able to run you through the process, stepwise, so you understand how exactly it's going to run even before the next phase of the grant program is rolled out. So this is all I have for you for now. I would pause for any questions.
May I have a question?
Yes.
This is Crystal Sierra from Slavic Village.
Okay.
Just wondering if green infrastructure projects take a long time to plan and design until you're ready for construction. Do you know how long this gap financing package will be available? Do you have any idea about that, or any?
Yes, for now, this is not going to cover design phase. This is going to be just construction. And so the assumption is that you would have received a construction grant from the sewer district for you to be able to access this. So for a lot of the construction, we know that the average timeline, Chris, is about 1 year, 12 months. But as I said, we would modify and structure the loan accordingly. So if your project and the timeline that you have is say 2 years, then we will structure the loan accordingly. So we are flexible to working around different project timelines.
So just thank you, Kwame. I appreciate the clarity on that. I think what I'm more interested to know is if we're not ready to apply for construction until like 2025 or 2026. Will this gap financing package be available to us then?
That's a very good question. The hope would be that this would become part of the suite of products that VCC offers on the ongoing basis. For now, we would want to pilot it, and depend on how successful we are and how helpful actually this is to the ecosystem, then we can be able to extend it and make it something that we do yearly. So it's a relationship that is just forming and evolving. So the hope is that we'll be able to do this in the very long term and have this be a continuous product that is available to CDCs. And then hopefully we can expand it to other actors in the neighborhoods that are looking to implement GIG programs.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Phil, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah,
Thank
just
you.
yeah, no problem. Just wondering if there is an ability to have a project management or admin fee as part of the GIG grants. That's always an issue that CICs face, is just, our staff has to dedicate time, to do this work. The second part is that can today's PowerPoint presentation just be emailed to everybody? Because this is really helpful information, but it'll be great to go back and reference some of this, deadlines, things like that.
Yeah, Phil, I'll answer the first question as well. Yes, the short answer is yes. So project management can be accounted for within a green infrastructure grant. That does leave less dollars for actual physical construction, of course, depending on the size of your project. But we often get that. A lot of design engineering firms will serve that role for a lot of our applicants. And we foresee that, the CDCs might be serving some capacity like that as well. So we don't have a set like percentage, like 10% of your request can only be the max. We don't have anything like that. So again, it's just, if it's reasonable, we will take that in consideration of your overall budget.
And as for second question, yes, we'll collect the PowerPoints and share the recording as well. Do we have other questions? If not, I'm going to throw a couple open-ended questions at you all. I think the part of it is for us to learn what you're going through and what makes this program better and how we can collaboratively make it better so we can have more projects come in our CSO areas. We have more CDCs, more partners accessing these kinds of opportunities. Kwame brought up environmental justice. That is the critical part of how we address the impacts of climate change. And so with that, I'm going to ask one, what are some of the barriers that you've faced? I know Phil just pointed out the admin grant barrier. Any other barriers that you've faced so far in getting a good application? Partly why I want to ask this question is the next workshop is focused on building a good application. So if you have questions around putting a good application together, some of those things, things that you'd like us to cover, this is a great time to put some of those things in here for us. So with that, if you have barriers that you'd like to see addressed, and then also some things that you'd like to see in the next workshop, that'd be great. You can either answer them, you can put them in the chat, we'll capture them. However you like to do this is just fine.
And Divya, just to tack on to your question and to Phil's earlier remarks, I'm also pretty interested in knowing, just from conversations with a lot of the CDCs, hearing from you if you feel you have the capacity in-house to do the project management. We know that as Chris said, some of the architectural firms will do that for you, but if you feel you have the capacity in-house to do a lot of the project management, one, and also if the line of credit becomes available, that sort of management of the line of credit, if you feel you have the capacity in-house to be able to do that. And if not, if there's additional, things we can do to be able to help augment some of those, and make this a smoother process for you, would be interested in hearing your thoughts and ideas.
Brittany, can you clarify, you dropped in there communication between parties. Are you talking about communications once you've got the project rolling? It's about project management. Is that what you're addressing? Sorry to put you on the spot, Brittany, but we'll leave that there. And then Crystal brings up the point about long-term maintenance, for instance, invasive taking over bioswales and preserve the GI. I think that's something that we can start to think about. I mean, we're talking about sending something that's useful for you in terms of a co-benefits. Right, so we're trying to put together a list of other grants that you're looking to access. But this is if you have things like this, maybe we can look into putting together lists of people who help with control and maintenance, and give you some pointers in those directions where we don't have some answers for those things right away. If Chris and Jessica, if you have some questions around that, if you have some answers around that, that's great.
Yeah, I'll just mention regarding Crystal's comment, maintenance is not a unique issue to most projects. And we recognize that pretty quickly. And that's why we now offer, as part of every application, every award, I should say, funding that's dedicated to the first year maintenance of any given project. Every application is in your budget is supposed to identify what you anticipate needing as far as financial resources to maintain the project for the first year after it's completed. And we are just now finishing our first year of actual maintenance that was utilizing those dollars. So we don't have many results to show you at this point of how effective that was. But we'll be learning more about that in the coming months here. Anytime you have vegetation in your practices, that's the big maintenance issue, especially as Crystal alludes to, weeds and invasive species taking over a beautiful planted bioretention cell. The one, I know which one she's talking about, and 12 months after it was put in, it didn't look anything like it was when it was the day it was put in, because the weeds just took over. So yeah, there's a lot of resources that need to be applied to maintaining vegetated practices specifically. Not as much related to like permeable pavements and things like that, but certainly there are still maintenance issues related to those. So, but yeah, so that's one way we are trying to help applicants overcome that issue. Always open to new ideas if anybody has any, as you have experiences with our grant. But we're hoping that helps resolve some of that so people know what to expect year after year after year as far as maintenance needs.
I mean, I think it's still a question, like we're still trying to figure it out ourselves. There are a number of sort of through ways and I'd say activation points, because these GI, like this GI infrastructure is really like a destination point too. And the ongoing maintenance can be very labor intensive, I would say, especially like with something like invasives, so that work needs to be contracted out. Like, I don't know, I myself, I'm not a horticulture specialist. I don't have any kind of background in that. And that can be, I think, a barrier too, is the ongoing maintenance of it after that first year.
Yeah, and one other thought that came to mind, the one project specifically that we've talked about, the planting palette we call was pretty elaborate. And there were a lot of different species, 3 of this, 5 of that, scattered throughout a large planting bed. We do recommend folks don't do that anymore. So that we recommend fewer species and larger groupings of species if possible, so that it's easy to know what is supposed to be there and what's not supposed to be there. So, and that helps to ease the burden, if you will, on being a horticulturalist, if you will. So I'm not one either. I know what I know because of this program. So, but there are ways to overcome that as well.
Yeah, I just want to second Crystal's comments. I think the reason we've been, as a CDC, been reluctant to apply for the grants, like for example, we had one of those roadway projects, the conceptual design for it included curb extensions with bioswales, but we backed off because we realized that, we just realistically don't have the capacity to maintain that. And I think that becomes the problem, is that if you don't have a defined property owner, someone who's going to maintain for sure, even like, asking, like getting a verbal commitment from a block club, that's just not enough, because those things, there's a lot of churn there. So it's really deterred, I think, some groups from doing that. I'll even say, like, the permeable pavers have been great. We have them in Gordon Square. We use GIG grants for that, but for the special improvement district's budget to be able to come out and service those, which is about $3,500 to $5,000 a year. I'm not sure how many other CDCs would have the ability to do that, because they don't have those types of dollars. This goes back to a little bit more of like the project idea I had, which is like those right-of-way projects seem like to be maybe a good candidate, possibly because if you get consent from those property owners, it's like them maintaining their sidewalk, or if they agree to, if we plant a tree in their tree lawn, that we can maintain it for an initial period of time, but then there's an understanding or they're required to maintain those spaces. So I'm hoping to explore that more and like work with you guys to figure that out, because I think there's like huge opportunity, because like given the locations for this. But I think, like to your point, Chris, maybe the better strategy is to just like narrow that in where it's not removing all of hardscape, where it's a tree lawn. Maybe it's those tree boxes, and we get the similar commitments we get with like the tree planting agreements. So we're still achieving goals of stormwater capture and the canopy rates, but it's just it's a more narrow thing that's more manageable, and the property owners individually are agreeing to maintain it.
Mhm. Yeah, Phil, one thing I'll add to that is, yeah, the idea of additional tree lawn area, if it's turf, that's still good. And if it's, and most people know how to manage turf, you mow it, for the most part. The trees can be a piece of that tree lawn area with a tree box perhaps. And so that could lessen the burden of the maintenance concerns, but yet still remove the impervious area.
Well, thanks, Chris. Thank you everyone for your questions. I know we're a minute from time, so I want to thank everybody for coming today. We'll send you follow-up email with all the resources, and we'll have everybody's email there as well. So if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to us. Very last thing I have for you is, should we continue for the next workshop? Do we want us to have a Zoom meeting, or would you prefer an in-person meeting in some location? Just a show of hands is good before we wrap this up. Or you can just say what you feel.
I think either of those is fine with me personally. Doesn't really matter.
Okay.
I'll just add that it would be great to meet you people firsthand. So I vote in person myself as a presenter. Kwame and I have worked on this project together for over a year now. We've never met face to face. So give us that chance.
All right. For most people, I'm saying either way is good. I'm hearing a few in person. Let's try an in person next time. That's a good way to break out from the snow, and we'll put it in a good place so you can hike into the place that we are going to host this. So thank you very much again, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to Chris and Jessica for bringing this. It's our real intention to have CDCs be more involved in this and have more access to these resources and be able to see them in areas that we haven't previously seen them, and create that access more. Again, thank you, Kwame, for this presentation and this project. So our next workshop is going to focus on having a good application. So feel free to send us questions about what you'd like to see. And the third workshop is really going to focus on the loan product and what its eligibility is going to look like, and how you would maintain if you get a loan, and project management around that. With that, again, happy holidays to everybody. Have a good time with family or just by yourself, taking some quiet time, and we'll see you fresh in the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.